Greetings, YouTube. I'd like to quote something I read on Metafilter not long ago. I apologize I didn't keep which particular thread this was. And it was in reference to Thanksgiving. The Thanksgiving story gets at the heart of the conflict between two different stories of America. Of the yelling, all the yelling about identity politics, all of the yelling about critical race theory, and a lot of it comes down to a desire to perceive America as fundamentally good, capital G, conceived in goodness and originating in goodness. Any attempt to correct the record about slavery or genocide get perceived as an attack on the goodness of America. Or in a more pithy statement I once heard, that racism is so much of a part of America that if you talk out against racism in America, people think you're talking against America itself. I'm not protesting against America when I protest the existence of racism or white nationalism or bigotry against any group, whether it's gay or trans or women or immigrants or non-Christians. I'm not attacking America for that. I'm attacking the bigots who have failed to live up to the ideals that America was built upon. But I'm also not ignoring the fact that the people that built that foundation in America were slave owners. They were misogynists. They were bigots. I'm not ignoring the fact that I know that the first Europeans to come here, at least as far as the mythology of America, the Pilgrims, the Puritans, didn't come here to build a utopia of religious freedom. I don't know how that one came into being, that particular myth. No, they were all about setting up a theocracy. That was their goal. Leave Europe, come to a virgin territory, which of course had been occupied by people for 20,000 years, and set up a religious theocracy. And in fact, when people didn't conform to their religious theocracy in like Massachusetts, they kicked their butt south, and that's where we got Connecticut from, in Rhode Island. But it wasn't about religious freedom. It was about religious bigotry. They wanted to establish their own isolated, bigoted community where everyone had to conform to a particular set of religious rules, and if you failed, at best, you got kicked out. And they didn't share with the indigenous people. Their goal was to eliminate the indigenous people. It's just that they discovered that they were completely and absolutely unsuited to surviving on this continent because they weren't properly trained or equipped. And so they actually needed the assistance of the indigenous people. And some of those indigenous people helped them, and much to the detriment of their descendants, because those Europeans that survived would then just go to wipe out the indigenous people that existed here. And remember, we used dislocation, we used warfare, we used disease. When I say we, I mean Europeans. Even though my family's been here for 5 generations, you can tell from by looking at me, I'm not indigenous to this continent. I'm a really, really white dude. I'm also a really, really white dude that has read books. Lots of them. And I've come to understand the history of my continent, the history of Europeans' actions towards non-Europeans. And we don't teach these things in school because it goes against the concept of goodness in America. We have to teach our history. If we're going to live up to our ideals, we have to know where we've come from. And we've come from some really dark places. And the only way we're going to get past that darkness, the only way we can progress past that and move forward, is to look at it critically. Is to teach the history and say, okay, this is what happened in the past. This is the reality. And we have to make sure that that reality of the past does not affect our actions in the present or our actions in the future. That we have to do better than them. That we have to completely be honest and say, yes, the Europeans that came here were not coming here with good intent. That they did not establish their colony here with good intent. That there was no positive actions that they committed against the peoples of this continent. That we all stand on stolen ground. And that all of us white people are standing on a pile of corpses of those that our ancestors subjugated and exploited to be where we are today. We have to teach this kind of thing, regardless of how ugly some Americans think it is. It is reality. And that's what terrifies them, because it means everything they learned as a child was a lie, because it was mythology, it was folklore, it wasn't reality. I recommend, I mean, if you're going to get into this, just dip your toe a little bit. Try Lies My Teacher Ted Told Me or Lies Across America. Two excellent books, which will bring you enough information to begin to, so you find that rabbit hole and you start going down it. Because once you start finding that rabbit hole, once you start going down that path of some actual history, you'll discover just how incredibly, unbelievably dark the foundations of America are. And we have to address that. We can't ignore it. To do so is going to be why we live in an atmosphere where white supremacy is being viewed in a positive light nowadays. Because they've had their mythology or their folklore of goodness called into question. So rather than face it and become educated, to become enlightened, they would rather turn to white nationalism so they can preserve that mythology. Because the preservation of that mythology to them is far more important than the fact that they're embracing white nationalism. And the fact that they're embracing an ideology that's going to lead to the deaths of women and black people and brown people and immigrants and non-Christians and gay people and trans people. They don't care about that, because it's not going to lead to their deaths. They're going to be able to continue to preserve the mythology in their own head. And for some people in America, the preservation of that mythology is far more important than the lives of other people.